So I want to thank everyone for being here on this call. We know that although most of us are at home practicing physical distancing, we are still very busy with phone calls or trying to help our employees out or our community out. So thank you very much. We thought this call was important so we could find out resources that the City of Toronto has to benefit our community and how to keep us afloat and through the recovery. I just wanted to let you know what the agenda is for this call. I'm doing the welcome and introduction. Councillor Thompson will speak, and then we'll have questions moderated by Nadine. And Councillor Thompson will do a closing, and then a thank you from Nadine. We are so extremely glad that our guest was able to join us today. If you follow him on social media, you know that he's extremely busy. He's always on calls. He's meeting with his constituents. He's trying to just keep things moving in the City of Toronto. Councillor Thompson, I'll do a very brief bio. I mean, it'll take us all hour to do his real bio, so I'm just going to do a condensed bio. Councillor Michael Thompson is Deputy Mayor, Chair of Toronto's Economic and Community Development Committee, and a member of the Mayor's Economic Support and Recovery Task Force. Now in his 5th term as councillor, Michael has earned a reputation as one of Toronto's hardest working, most effective political leaders. He's not only a champion for his constituents of Scarborough Central Ward 21, the City of Toronto, but also our community. As many of you know, he has ensured that our voices are heard at City Hall by including us on committees, roundtables, and providing us with access. We are so happy that he's able to take the time of his busy schedule to be with us today. Welcome, Councillor Thompson.
Good morning, everyone.
If you want to take a few moments just to let us know for everybody in general, particular community, that'd be great.
I didn't hear a word you just said.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. If you want to take a few moments just to let us know what you've been doing with the City of Toronto and what resources that might be available to us in general and the community.
Sure. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to participate on this call. I'm delighted that I have 2 of my staff members, as well as from my immediate office, Ihor Wands and Keisha Francis are, I believe, on the line as well. And I've invited Paul Perry, who is responsible for our Enterprise Toronto office. And I know that Nadine and others may be aware of Paul. I know Nadine specifically, you work with Paul because of some of the programs we've been engaged in and so on for business in the City of Toronto. You know, it's with great regrets that we're having this conversation as a result of COVID-19. I know that I've had many conversations with Velma and Operation Black Vote and Nadine. We've been working together for some time, but I know that this is an expanded call with others who some I may know and some I may not know, who are business professionals in the Black community. And I suspect that most of the callers who are on the line may be from Ontario. I don't know if they're from other areas of the country. So I say that it's with great regrets that we are here as a result of COVID-19, because we have done a lot of work in terms of reaching out and so on in advance of this type of situation where we would talk and to hear from the community as to what some of the challenges and the needs are. We know that at the best of times, the Black community and Black businesses have challenges. So in this particular period where it's a pandemic situation that is global in its nature, we know that the community is further burdened as a result of COVID-19 and so on. And so I've had some conversations with the mayor as it relates to what we could and must do for Black-owned businesses in light of the comments I've just made earlier. And so we are looking in general as to what we can do for businesses in general, but specifically Black as well as indigenous businesses. We're looking at what we can do. I will say to you that at this particular point in time, we have not arrived at a conclusion at this point, because part of our effort is to work with both the federal government and the provincial government. And Nadine, you know this all too well, because you've participated in at least one of the calls. We've had calls over the last number of weeks with bankers. We've had calls with landowners, retailers, and a vast array of the varying sectors that make up our economy in Toronto and the national economy. The conversations with the mayor, myself, and the budget chief has had with the sector community, wanting to hear from them. What are some of the challenges that they're experiencing? What are some of the ideas, some of the things that they'd like to see the City of Toronto and the mayor advocate on their behalf? I will say to you that the mayor has established the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force, which is led by the mayor, myself, and Councillor Crawford, who's the budget chief. We're working with all of our members of council as well. Each of them have additional assigned responsibilities to work in this varying sector: business, arts, culture, music, and so on. And so we're trying to also work with the province in terms of, directing information to them that we've learned and garnered from the varying sectors, because the federal government and provincial government have many more tools than we have at the municipalities. We've also seen an engagement by the mayor with the BCMC, which is a big city mayors caucus across the country, to talk about how we can help businesses right across the country. And of course, we know that the diversity of the country is certainly reflected mostly in the Toronto area, Montreal, Vancouver, but also in other areas of the country as well. So that is a bit of an overview. I will say to you that we have not finalized any specific initiative to provide assistance to the Black community or any other business in the city, other than to say that we have extended the grace period for property tax payments and utility payments and so on. We've advanced that to a 60-day deferral, and that may also change moving forward. We've seen as well some of the work that's been done both by the province and by ourselves. Prior to COVID, on March 1st of this year, the hydro rates went down by 17.4%. The rates have also gone down further through the work of the Premier and the Hydro One and Toronto Hydro, which is to reflect the fact that so many more people are at home because of the requirements for people to stay at home. So the peak period costing rates have changed. So those are some of the things that are taking place. So I'll stop there, and I will perhaps turn it back to you, Madam Moderator, and then I can maybe take some specific questions.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Thompson, so much for being here. As president of the BBPA, we hear the concerns of the Black business community. We've done a needs assessment over the last few weeks, just reaching out to the different Black businesses and just hearing their concerns. And, their concerns are valid, because in the best of times, the Black community sees issues in terms of lack of support for their business, just based on skin color. And in the worst of times, we can imagine that it certainly will not be any better. And so the businesses are concerned. Tomorrow is April 1st, and a lot of them are concerned about their rent. They're concerned about their viability of their business, and rightly so. And so this call is to provide, some answers. I think there'll be more discussion. It'll be an ongoing discussion, because I'm sure it won't all be solved here. But I do want to thank you for your time, because I know we see that you're I wouldn't say you're busy. You're committed. You're committed to the work of serving Torontonians, and I want to thank you for that, and thank you for joining us. And we do have some individuals on the line that we will ask to pose their questions. We have Romaine Baker from Black Urbanism Toronto, who works in specifically with Little Jamaica, and we'll get to that in a bit. But at the top, I'll start off with the first question. What financial help is available to events? Many events in our Black community will be rescheduled or postponed due to the coronavirus.
Okay, with respect to the specific questions around events, we have our EDC staff responsible for the cultural sector working on a number of elements to derive at a plan in which we're hoping to roll out information coming forward at some point. I don't know at this point, I can't be too specific as to the dates. So specifically, we have been working with the Toronto Arts Council, for example. They have in fact launched a program where they're raising funds. We have also looked at our own resources to see what potentially we could allocate through this particular process. We've also set up, and it's being finalized, in fact, today I have a conference call with staff. We are setting up a community, business and community fund, which is to allocate specifically to the cultural and the social sector. We have received requests from a variety of individuals who are interested in contributing to help in this area, to provide funding to the city, as well as other types of opportunities in terms of services going forward. So we're going to capture that through our partnership office, and at a later date, we will be commenting on what specific resources are going to be available to this sector.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Thompson, if any organization is planning an event receives funds prior to this pandemic, how are you treating those funds? Do they have to send it back to the city, or how are they responsible for those funds?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't think that we have formulated a particular policy on that yet, but let me give you an example. We have an event that I started about 17 years ago. It's called the Taste of Lawrence. It's a street festival. We generally will have over 150,000 people over the course of a 3-day period. It is very well, obviously, supported by the community. We have the TD Bank is a signature sponsor for a significant amount of funds that they provide us, along with the support from the BIA. Yesterday, we received the funds for 2020 from the TD Bank. And last night at a meeting called by the board and myself, we actually canceled the 2020 event. And so we are going to send the money back to the TD if that's what they should so desire. We're going to refund those vendors who had already prepaid and so on. However, the cost that we've incurred, the sunken costs at this point, obviously are just that. We will not require that vendors pay us back for the service that they have rendered and so on. So in a roundabout way, in terms of responding to your question, if the funds that have been received have been allocated and have been spent because the service has been provided, there would not be an expectation to pay that back because the funds are not there. However, if the funds were not spent or not going to be spent because the event is not going to continue or has been postponed and so on and so forth, we would see that those funds should be returned. If the event is being, let's say, rescheduled for a later date in this calendar year, I would see that those funds could be utilized to support the event, of course, because that's what it was designed for. If the event is going to be moved over to next year, I would say it's a conversation that has to take place, because if the monies do not need to be spent because the event's not going to continue, then I think that those funds should be returned. And of course, the expectation is that when you move ahead with the event, the support that was originally promised would be there.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. The next question is, are there any specific supports for Black Canadian-owned businesses based in Toronto outside of the general supports announced by the federal and municipal government?
Well, so I want to make sure that the community is fully vested in terms of the information that's available, both in terms of the provincial government and the federal government in terms of what has been announced. One of the things that we wanted to do, which is to provide a great degree of clarity to businesses, because we know, small business owners and small businesses make up the bulk of the 90,000 plus businesses that are based in the city of Toronto, not in the region, but in the city of Toronto proper. That's over 85% of the businesses that are here in the city. So we wanted to create a portal where information would be readily available for all three levels of government. So we have put up on our website, toronto.ca, a city's response to COVID-19. I'd invite your members and others to visit this page. It shows what the economic support and recovery is for business. It has sort of in a sort of a précis form the information for the federal government, the announcement they've actually made in the last number of days, and the provincial government and so on. And as I said earlier, we are still working on what initiatives we will be planning to roll out. I give you that information in the sense that the context, which is extremely important. Federal government and the provincial government have a vast array of, if you will, resource options that they can utilize. Federal government has actually allocated some, which, for example, one of the big one is the Business Credit Availability Program. It's a $10 billion program. I'd invite members that are here on the line to take a look at that. It's a combination of funding from the BDC as well as Export Development Canada. And of course, we want to make sure that there's a full understanding that businesses who have the ability to apply for these loans and initiatives and so on would meet the standard tests that you would go through, right? And so there isn't a pool of funds that's just available. There's a pool of funds that's available, but the criteria is obviously are required to be met. Similarly, the provincial government has some programs. One of the other things that I wanted to address, it's the wage subsidy program that has been announced by the federal government, and we, the city, in terms of the conversations that we've been having over the last number of weeks with the different sectors around the wage subsidy, because I think that's extremely important for small businesses. The federal government has announced an amount of up to 75%. They're not fully clear as to the details. My understanding is that the finance minister, Minister Morneau, will be making some announcements today to provide more details. And I know that the Prime Minister talked a little bit about it yesterday and prior. It is something that we, on behalf of the varying sectors, have brought forward. We've talked about, deferral on some of the other the GSTs and the responding to GST and HSTs and so on, recognizing that HST and GST is monies that are collected and should be submitted. Whether or not the government chooses to provide an opportunity on that, we're not sure, because if you're collecting for them, it makes it more difficult for them to simply say, you can keep that, because then is that considered as a loan or is that a grant, because that's money's collected. So those are some of the things that are actually in place. Additionally, I go back to what we have done with respect to the deferral on the issues around the taxes, as well as the fees for utilities and other permits that businesses may be required to deal with. And I note that the next question, of course, would be, what about rents? And because that's an important piece. I have a vast list of people who have reached out to me already. There are two component parts with respect to the rent. The province and the Premier has announced that, and the announcement is that you cannot be evicted if you don't pay a rent. But I think I want people to understand what my understanding of that is. It's actually residential rent. it's not commercial rent. And so the commercial piece, it appears that there's silence on that. I'm not sure why, but it seems to have been omitted. So that's the piece that a lot of people are having some challenges. What we have done in the city, we had contacted many of the landlords, and both in terms of the rental and the commercial landlords, we've spoken with them. Many have expressed to us on the commercial side that they are willing to work with their tenants. Some I know, because it has been reported to me and to others, that the landlords have indicated to some of their tenants, for example, that they're waiving the April rent and the next payment would be made in May. Others have actually had other types of arrangements with respect to their tenants, such as providing a more reduced amount, such as engaging in a payment plan, because as we're learning, many businesses requires the cash flow to assist them, obviously, to pay their bills. I'll give you an example. Last night at about 9 o'clock, I spoke with a business owner in the ward, and he and his wife are the owners of a business here, and they're required to pay tomorrow $10,000, which they do not have. They have about $3,000, but the $3,000 is required to pay a variety of different payments, which is some of it applies to wages to some of their employees. Some of it is around utilities and some other payments and so on. And so the landlord has indicated that he wants his full rent, and that's his expectation. Part of the call that I'm going to be making today is to speak with the landlord to see how we could work, or how the landlord can work with the tenant who has been in business, who's been at that premises for 15 years. You know, that's a long time. Because the tenant now does not have business coming in, they're not able to generate the revenue, and they don't have vast savings that are just there. He's indicated to me that his line of credit is such that it would, be exhausted at a very short period of time. And then, of course, he has to pay that. And so it's an ongoing conversation. So I will say, for those of you who are on the line, that part of what we have to do is the advocacy process right now to make sure that, and we have to do that here as well as a municipality. I will be speaking with the mayor about this call that we've actually had. And so that we will also do our best to speak out publicly about this issue around rent and the challenges that people are having paying the rent, because the revenues, the cash flow is all dried up.
Thank you, Councilor Thompson, for that. Now, we can't have you call in all the landlords for all of us. So thank you for bringing that to me.
Actually. I just need some more work.
So thank you for doing that. In the meantime, I guess your recommendation
is... I'm available to call some of the landlords if you reach out. I'm fine.
Okay. You heard that, everybody. Okay. I was trying to offload you, but okay.
That's fine.
Call Michael Thompson. He'll call your landlord if he's available. Okay. Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you. So, Councillor, you mentioned, and as we all know, that there are a lot of resources that's announced by the federal government. And, the question we get all the time is, how do we access the funds?
Right.
How do we access the funds? So is there anything that the city has or can do in helping our local Black businesses access these funds?
So the conversations that we've been actually having is to try to find a more efficient way to allow for the information to flow. In as much as we're talking about Black-owned businesses, I will tell you that there are a lot of other non-Black-owned businesses that are having similar experiences that the Black-owned businesses are having. So what we're actually trying to do is to provide a greater clarity. And so with the COVID-19 response page that I've indicated to you, we're trying to create that portal where we could have, sort of more specific information to break it down. We know, for example, that the number of claimants, the number of people who are applying to the government right now for EI has just exhausted the system, as an example, right? And so the challenge that we have is not only about clarity, it's also about capacity in terms of businesses and others going online to make the claim or going through that particular process and so on. So it is something that we have brought to the attention of both the provincial and federal government regarding ensuring that there is an ease of actually access to information and ease of, the application process, which you have to go through to provide submission. And I know that the feds are taking into consideration. I'm not aware that they have fully responded to that request yet, but it's something that we have raised because it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, of course. Okay, thank you. I'm going to take a question from one of the online businesses, Roger Dundas from Buy Blacks. You had your hand up, Roger? Roger? No? Okay, we will move on. Romaine Baker from Black Urbanism Toronto has a question. Sorry, Romaine, I'm just unmuting you right now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Nadine. Thanks, Councillor Thompson.
Morning.
So we've been working in the Little Jamaica area. And as we're speaking with, the businesses, obviously at this time, they're all being impacted. But there is a unique circumstance here where we know that there's a unique cluster, there's an economic cluster of businesses that specialize in hair care, like the barbershops and salons. And all of these businesses have been designated as non-essential and have been ordered to close their doors. So at this point, it's not a matter of them not just being able to make enough revenue. At this point, they're making absolutely none. And if they were to try to keep operating, they would be non-compliant with this order. But despite being ordered to close their doors, they are expected to pay their rent. So we understand that this order was made by the province. But what can the city do to ensure that these businesses receive financial relief, or that that at least the province develops policy to address their unique circumstance?
Sure. So I just want to revisit again the city's area of I guess jurisdiction and sort of ability. I guess I'll use those terms. So the city operates on a budgetary process where it's required to have what's called a balanced budget. So when we allocate our budget and we fix our budget for a specific period, such as in 2020, all of our expenditures will meet the revenues that we generate. And so at the end of the day, it balances out. So when additional pressure comes in to the city, unless we have some reserves allocated and as well as surplus, we don't have funds to allocate for the sort of unforeseen, events that such as COVID-19. Where those, the funds would normally come from, and in this case, it's both the feds and the province. So the big thing that the city can do is to advocate for resources to help those businesses that are impacted by the specific condition. Let me just then turn to the specifics as it relates to, the Eglinton Crosstown and the impact of those businesses, because this issue certainly started well before COVID. I hope you'll agree, because of the impact of the construction activities on Eglinton. A lot of businesses were affected because people essentially started to minimize their visits to that area because of the challenge of parking, et cetera, et cetera. One of the motions that I had moved as part of the agreement with the province and the city was that we should build in a financial component for support for businesses on Main Street when major construction activities are taking place, because we know by the experience with St. Clair that businesses are actually impacted with any construction activities, and much less a major construction activities such as, transit lines and tracks being laid and so on. And so I know that we are, Romain, looking at that situation in a way that actually started before the COVID-19 matter, and there are no substantive solutions on the table just yet, but it is something that we continue to work on to see how we can help business. Now, I know that, you may say to me, well, how much longer is this going to take? Because the longer businesses wait, the more dire the situation becomes. I know that, and I get that. However, we want to be able to find ways, and we had also worked with Metrolinx to see how they could help this area that's been impacted. I do have a similar situation in my ward on Eglinton, because the crosstown comes and cuts right through, where we had some immediate challenges because of the lack of preparation, the lack of marketing, and just the challenges that we had with respect to some of the construction activities taking place. We have been able to work through many of those things to clear intersections, to clear driveways, to create alternative paths of entrance and access to businesses. We have worked with respect to promotions and so on. So while I know that Eglinton is a little bit, Eglinton to the west that you speak of is a little bit different from Eglinton East, where we have made, secondary road networks where people can travel and go into the back of some of these businesses and so on, and people are utilizing those. Whereas Eglinton to the west does not have the same features. We are trying to work on more promotions and whatnot, but at the same time, I realize that the closure requirement by the province has hit these small businesses, and this is where the federal government programs coming in to assist businesses. Again, there's a loan amount of up to $40,000 for businesses, of which up to $10,000 could be considered as a grant. Details, I don't have all the details, but that is an element that's there. And so again, additional to that, though, the conversation with the landlords and the business owner about the fact that, there is no revenue coming in, there is an expectation that I can pay you. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the landlords who are saying to, the tenants, pay up or else, the question is, or else what? Are you going to close the door, lock the door because you're going to rent it to someone else? There is no lineup for these landlords in terms of people coming to rent these spaces. So they too are facing pressure, and it's something that they must realize. And those are some of the things that we're trying to identify for them.
Great, thank you. Romain, does that answer your question? Very excellent points, Councillor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. And I think, it will definitely require like a multi-pronged approach.
Yes.
But given that it is that this order disproportionately affects like the number of businesses in this area, I think we should look at also maybe loosening what that restriction on non-essential businesses like means and looks like. Like, for example, if the concern is having a large amount of people like in a given space, some of these businesses have already adopted appointment-based systems where they can control the flow and the number of people coming into their stores, and they can use the necessary cleaning equipment and doing things to mitigate like the spread of the virus. Without any kind of flexibility, they're just hitting a roadblock, and they might not be eligible for the wage subsidies because barbers, for example, are all self-employed individuals. So if we can, I guess, try to consider some creative solutions, I think it would be Very helpful.
Okay, so let me try to address that. And I'm thankful that you pointed out that barbers and some of these hair care professionals are in fact sole proprietors and individual operators and so on. I'm aware that there are resources that are in place now to assist them with respect to funds to help them to live. And I'll use the term survive because I think that it was mentioned to me yesterday. Someone said, look, some of the resources that are being allocated, it's not enough for me to live in the way I think I should be living now, but it's helpful. It will help me to survive. So I'll take that as a given that the funds that are being allocated is not sufficient. I think that the challenge with government programs and funding, the funds are never, ever sufficient to the point where everybody is happy. But I will also tell you that I spoke to folks in Panama late last night and this morning, and they've told me about some of the things that they're doing. And I'll use this as an example because I think this is appropriate, where they're allowing women out on certain days and men out on other days and so on. Yet when I spoke to them late last night, they said, we've seen in the case of the virus increasing, not decreasing, and so on. I will, say to you that it's a very tough situation for everybody. And I know it's tougher as well for the Black-owned businesses because of the preamble that I made earlier on in terms of at the best of times, it's the worst of times for businesses in our community. And at the worst of times, it's the worst of times for businesses in our community, just because of the nature of what happens. So with respect to the Panama scenario, they've seen an increase because they supposedly thought they would sort of relax and put measures in place that are not fully sort of such that everyone is being impacted. I agree that the situation is acute within the Black community. I disagree, however, with this idea that we're going to look at ways to relax the rules, particularly in this sector for the Black community, because when we do that, we're going to have to relax the rules for others as well. In as much as I know, and we've stated along that, the impact is more severe in the community, the fact of the matter is that I think that the, short-term pain that we have to go through will actually help us in the long run in terms of survivability, to a healthier community, a healthier Black community, and so on. Because all we need is one person to go into a barber shop, and that barber goes home to his or her family and picks up something and takes it home. And then we have, a more advanced impact with respect to health impact. And so I realize the situation is acute because we're fighting two conditions here. On one hand, we're fighting a health condition, which is the epidemic, the pandemic. On the other, we're fighting an economic crisis. So there are two crises that we're fighting, and we realize that. So we're trying to do our best to combat both as best as we can, based on the best professional advice that we're getting from our MOH and the professional folks that are Chief Matt Pegg, who's is in charge of the emergency office of the city, and the collective of information that's coming forward from a vast array of professionals and so on. So we're going to have to work through it. And I think part of what I would just add to the comments that you've made, Romain, and by the way, I think the suggestion is one it has, merits, but the fact is when we look at it, we have to then look at what we're trying to do, which it then fails the long-term tests of viability and ensuring that we protect the health and welfare and safeguard everyone's interests. And because there is resources coming to those individuals so that they can, they may not be able to pay all of their rents at the same time, and we have to work through that, but they can provide, food and shelter for their families and so on, and they can stay and maintain a healthier disposition, and they reduce the risk of either catching or basically, disseminating the virus in the community as a whole.
Great, thank you. We do have some other questions. Trevor, I see your hand up, but I had a few more. But I just want to welcome Alvin Curling, who's on the call. Hello, Mr. Curling. And I want to comment that I think what's going to happen, and we discussed this a little bit at the mayor's roundtable, special task force roundtable the other day, is I think there's going to be a new way of doing business out of this, because when we think about the challenges that's happening now, and even for the funding that is provided or will be provided by the various levels of government, there's something that's always mentioned, if qualified, or there's got to be a criteria. So what is that criteria, and how do we help the businesses? For example, I use Little Jamaica as the example because it's always good to have sort of real examples of a state of readiness. I think businesses are going to have a state of readiness, because one of the challenges with the funding provided by the federal government is individuals will have had to file their taxes. And so if you're not a business that has filed your taxes, or an individual that has filed your taxes, you're not going to be able to participate in any of the stimulus incentives that's been provided. So I think it's going to be quite interesting when this is done in terms of how we set up businesses for success. The next question, I'm going to take it from Alicia. Can you go ahead? And ask your question. Just me on video. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if, hi, I was just wondering if we're collecting disaggregated information on Black and Indigenous businesses, particularly during the pandemic. I know you started out by mentioning that at the best of times, Black businesses are disadvantaged, and so even more so at this point. And so just wondering if we're taking the time to make sure that we have that information, because that will help with public policy in the future. And part of why I asked that is I remember looking at the survey that covers economic support and recovery business. And I don't remember there being a data point around, do you identify as a business owned by a person of color? And so this is the questions I have.
Thank you very much for the questions. And I think those are valid questions. All of the questions are valid, to be quite frank with you. It's something that we had already started to look at. In fact, Nadine knows this because we had reached out to the BBPA as well as the Black Chamber of Commerce to talk a little bit around what are the needs and what are some of the challenges. So we had already started doing this work internally. And I will say that the survey, and I'm glad you've seen the survey, isn't reflective of that per se at this point. It was a rather quick response to trying to get some information from business in general. But let me then say this, because I think this is extremely important as it relates to the questions and comments you made. As I said earlier in my comments, it was, it's with great regrets that we're actually having this conversation based on the fact that it's as a result of this pandemic and this economic crisis that's actually bringing us together. I think it should be wise, and all of us, that we need to have these conversations and ongoing conversations. We need to be part of the decision-making process on an ongoing basis, not just ad hoc. I know that I've discussed this with the leaders from the Chamber and the BBPA, and I know that Nadine has been, and Nadine, if I could just take a moment just to thank you certainly for your leadership, and certainly Velma as well, but Nadine, we have been talking for some time about initiatives and issues. I know you have been working with Paul Perry as well on behalf of your members, and Paul is from the Enterprise Toronto office and some of the initiatives there. But Alicia, you're right, we have to do more. And I will say this, I'll make this basic promise to the community. And politicians with promises, right? But I am not really coming at from that lens, but I'm simply saying to you, I'm here to work with you and to assist as best as we can to bring forward ideas and recommendations and to ensure that going forward, that this is going to be a group of people, and some of the organizations are going to be extremely important to have their voices added to the conversations and their ideas of their members being brought forward as part of the recommendation. What we did most recently with the calls that we've had as part of the mayor's task force on support and recovery, we have ensured that the chamber and the BPPA are part of the larger discussion that's taking place, and at the same time, the subtext of the more focus areas of interest to the Black community. So that it's a double prong approach in terms of trying to address some of these issues. The other thing that I wanted to add is that we have started to look at our city's own procurement and looking to see that Black-owned businesses will have more opportunities to be able to have access to city contracts and opportunities in terms of the RFPs, RFQs, and so on. We want to open that portal much wider to create that opportunity. And so this is some of the ongoing discussions that we're having, and I would invite the BBPA and the Chamber to obviously lend their voices to this important part of business opportunity. And we've heard this from others as well. We've heard it from the tech sector. We've heard it from other sectors saying, you know, look, we would like to use our technology, and we'd like to have the city use our technology. It creates more opportunities for us and innovation. I'll also say, though, that like we saw in 2008 with respect to the economic crisis that occurred, there is a tremendous amount of innovations and creativity and just new ways of doing things. I want to make sure I encourage the community to turn their minds to, you know, really thinking about how to do things different and so on, and how to, you know, to engage and how to bring ideas and thoughts forward so that it could be part of the changes that certainly will come as a result of this process that we're going through with, you know, with COVID-19. And Nadine, I'll touch a little bit later on digital Main Street and technology and so on. I suspect that I'll leave that, I'll come back to that, or perhaps you can pose a question on that a little bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'd like us to come back to that, especially because we've got Paul, but I've got just two more. So I've got a question from Anton, and then after that, it'll be Trevor. Go ahead, Anton.
Yes, good afternoon. How are you doing? Yeah, so in terms of question, Counselor, typically speaking, one of the biggest challenges that we have with it as a community is oftentimes we are going to be disenfranchised the most because a lot of our businesses, to a certain extent, are client facing, to whatever extent, whether they be barbers, whether they be hair salons, whether they even be actual businesses. So oftentimes, and because of that, a lot of them are quote unquote or traditional type businesses. They are oftentimes the most impacted by such downturns, i.e. right now, even the bail that's going on right now, it's not going to be enough to cover a lot of people's expenses, right? And so what it might turn to be is the underground business starts to expand. So with that being said, earlier on, you'd mentioned that the government operates on a balanced budget. Clearly, that might be a challenge, given some of the hardships that some of the challenge that the business are right now. So my question is this: is there any avenues, or is there any access that you know is coming down the pipeline that can give our community in advance, well, not in advance, that they can start to lean towards? Because oftentimes, because we may not have the access or the connections, our people doesn't really know. And by the time they hear about what revenue might be available, similar as you mentioned before, the unemployment, for example, it goes over inundated. Is there any new programs that are coming down that we can say, listen, look out for this one or prepare for this one? Or is there any type of insight you can say? You had mentioned, you know, turning a certain amount of business to Black owned, but if we don't have the infrastructure right there, it might be challenging. Is there any insight you can provide along that lines?
Sure, and thank you very much for the question. And I think really what really needs to happen is that I think that this is just my personal view. And I'll just tell you, prior to government, I was a businessman in the financial sector as well as in the wholesale importing and exporting of products. I used to sell products to Shoppers Drug Mart years ago, Super X drugstores, and a vast array of others in the tech sector and so on. I also used to be in the beauty products business as well. I will tell you, my first venture in business primarily was selling hair care products as a result of working for a New York Life insurance company as a treasury analyst. I'd go to Atlanta pretty well every third week. And I ended up at the Peachtree Hotel, saw the Bonner Brothers beauty salon conference that they were having there, a trade show, and walked around and saw these products, and they didn't have any Canadian distributors. It was just one of those things you kind of locked into, and that was pretty interesting and so on. So I just give you that as a point of reference. But I wanted to say that this is a really good question that you're asking, and all the questions, by the way, are terrific. But I think this pandemic situation and the COVID-19 virus perhaps should cause our community to do a rethink in terms of how we do things. You know, in the last couple of days, I've spoken to so many people about what they're going to do, whether or not it's manufacturing hand sanitizers or gloves or face masks and all the different things. I can tell you that none of them are Black owned or Blacks who have brought these ideas to me. There are a lot of other folks, right? I think that perhaps there's a real need for a rethink. And I think this could be assisted certainly by the city, but also by the BBPA and the chamber and so on, to allow us, particularly a lot of our young people, and I know that Alvin Curling, as said, is on the line, and people like Alvin who are distinguished, leaders in our community, to come to talk with everyone who's interested in formulating new ideas and new approaches to business, to come to talk about the things that businesses should be doing, filing their taxes, making sure that their documentations are up to date and so on, so that if there are conditions or situations like these, we don't have to, focusing on, we're an underground economy and so on, so we're not really vested or caught in the system where we can actually bring legitimate information forward. I don't think that's what was being said, but that's part of what I thought I heard. And so while there are ways and means that we're thinking about trying to bring more people, young people, to the forefront, and the ideas around starting a business and getting engaged and looking at ways and means to be a more entrepreneurial, this is something that we're trying to do and trying to foster through our enterprise Toronto and so on. And I know that Paul Perry's on the line. So Paul, I wonder if I can just digress for a quick moment and just maybe ask Paul to talk about some of the things that we have been doing, helping businesses. Some of them are Black owned, some of them are young people of color who are interested in starting, but just in general. So Paul, are you there?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just unmuting myself.
Yes, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about some of our programs and initiatives that we've undertaken. One of the big ones that we did last year and will be continuing this year is our Retail Accelerator program. And so that's a grant and training that we're able to offer to small businesses in the retail-based sector. It's funded by the province of Ontario. Last year, we went over to Parkdale and Wexford. We went down to the beach in Etobicoke as well to offer this program. I do understand the need for this program, along the LRT construction lane. So we're really happy to be looking at that for both the York-Eglinton BIA as well as the Fairbank Village BIA this coming year. It is a provincial program, so their calendar year starts tomorrow. So we'll be looking to formalize those programs in the next in the next month or so. So that's one initiative that we're undertaking, specific for Little Jamaica and the surrounding neighborhood. With that said as well, we do understand that this is a new time, a challenging time. So we're also looking at offering some new COVID-19 webinars. So the first one's going to be about managing finances and cash flow, how to market during this time, and how to work remotely. And those are 3 initiatives that we're going to be offering completely free of charge. So we expect to have those up and running next week. Another initiative that we've been talking about is the expansion of the Digital Main Street program. So for those who are aware, Digital Main Street is a way for traditional retail-based businesses to expand their footprint in a digital age. It's seen great success. The program is actually launching some pilots in BC as well as the States. So it's growing really well, and it's a really exciting project. And shortly, we'll also be announcing that we're working in partnership with the Board of Trade to set up a portal for individuals to get some questions answered. It's going to be, in addition to our website, which I'll plug again, toronto.ca/COVID-19, a resource for people who have questions, who need answers, who are looking for supports. The Deputy Mayor mentioned the $40,000 program that was announced last Friday. I think that's a really great program. 30,000 of that 40 is going to be at a low to no interest loan. And then the remaining 10 can be forgivable. So that's another really good program the federal government has recently announced to help small businesses. But the main thing that we are doing right now, and I thank you, Deputy Mayor, for inviting me to attend this session, is really just listening to residents all across the city to find out what their concerns are. And that will help us formulate the best path forward. We also have a survey that was launched on the COVID-19 page to help us, again, continue to identify challenges that are faced within the business community across the city of Toronto. Equity is something that I care about. I know that my director and general manager also, it's top of mind for them as well. So ensuring that our services don't always go to the same people, but we really work to have an equitable distribution of services across the city as a whole.
Great.
Let me just add, can I just jump in there for a second, yeah. Nadine? We're also working with some of the institutions. I spoke a couple of days ago with Dr. Mohammed Lakshmi, who is the president CEO of Ryerson University, about working with us on some of the issues, and Paul talked a little bit about the retail program and so on. Additionally, we reached out to the folks at Mars, Young Woo, who is the CEO there. We brought them in because we want them to be involved with us. And here's the thing. I mean, we know that a lot of businesses going sort of utilizing technology and so on. We also want to get like a lot more young people of color into tech, and there's a tremendous amount of work that we're doing with Lee Ken and others and so on around this area. I think part of what I'm recognizing as a result, I think that we have to do a better job with the city to make sure that our information is getting out, and it's getting out through either the chamber, the Operation Black Vote, and others and so on. And I would also say, I think that as part of this exercise, I really think that we, and this could be done through the Chamber and Operation Black Votes and others and so on. And of course, you know, the BBPA, of course, right? That we need to have a conversation for the community, about the community, in terms of what are the things that we need. And I think, you know, thinking about this, it's perhaps time that the community comes together and develop its own strategic plan for, you know, business action and business initiatives and so on, so that we can identify, for example, where a lot of the growth is going to take place and what are those particular sectors. Now, it may not be that everyone wants to be in those spaces, and I get that, but I think that it's sufficient to say that there are many who might be interested in being in those spaces who may not know right now how to kind of get onto the on-ramp of those tech opportunities and those opportunities where we see the future is actually going. You know, Paul has just mentioned about Digital Main Street. This is something that we're actively, and the mayor and I and the team have been talking about, you know, putting resources into to expand the program where those businesses can, you know, operate even in an environment as we're facing now. So there is you know, great opportunities in terms of moving forward. But I think part of what we need to see, and I use the term we, being government in general, the community has to come forward with its objectives and its ideas in terms of what they want to see and how they want to see you know, things operate and so on. I'd also invite people to follow, you know, my social media on a daily basis for updates that we put things out and so on. And going forward, we'll be able to do that. You know, Instagram is at @Councillor_Thompson, and it's really important for us to stay connected. And the Twitter is at Thompson_37. So we'll all be getting more information out as we move forward.
Councillor Thompson, thank you for that. Can you tell us how we can get involved in the recovery for those people who are able to? How do we start to get involved in the recovery? Because it's going to happen, and we want our voices heard, and we want to be involved.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. So let me explain to you what we're doing now. And just yesterday, we sort of actioned out a lot of the work to be done. But the work to be done is not just government doing this work. As I said earlier, the mayor has put together a task force consisting of myself, the mayor leading the task force, and Councillor Crawford, who's the budget chief. Under that, there's a layer. There'll be other members of council looking at a variety of different things. There'll be education, community outreach, business retention, and so on. And part of this recovery process, which we have this overarching connections on, we're asking individuals, we're asking businesses, we're asking organizations to come up with and provide us with ideas as to what are some of the things that they want to see, what are some of the tools that they feel that they need from government. And again, it's not just the municipal government, but all levels of government and so on, so that we could actually put all of these ideas into the process. And we have right now over 600 plus ideas that have come forward. We're color coding, we're doing a variety of different things, trying to identify the ones that are, you know, short-term, medium-terms, and long-terms, the ones that some requires no funding to actually get started. And it's really helpful, obviously, to have a vast array of options, ones that are requiring funds, requires no funds, and what have you. So I would simply say, going forward, we want to hear from everyone in terms of what their thoughts or ideas are in terms of how we come out of this recovery. We are planning, at the same time we're dealing with this issue of this pandemic situation, and looking at support, because the support was, I mean, the health, understanding and addressing the health issue was the most immediate and most acute things that we needed to do. The second piece of it was how to help people, because it's important that we help everyone and that we leave no one behind. And certainly the third piece in terms of this three-pronged approach is the recovery piece, which is a big piece. It's going to be certainly much longer, but at the same time, I want to tell you that our objective is to actually have a plan so that once we have the all clear from the medical professionals and so on and so forth, we will be ready to action out and start this recovery process. And once we deal with this, the physical and social distancing and so on, one of the things that I've asked our staff to do, and it's to work with some of the psychologists and sociologists and so on, because behavior is going to be a really important issue going forward. How will people behave in social settings? How will people react coming out of this isolation? It's a more societal isolation in essence, except for the essential services that are taking places and so on. So there is a very cognizant approach that we need to actually put in place. So a lot of that work is being done, but suffice to say, it is important to hear from the community and the ideas that you have about how we deal with their support, how we deal with respect to the recovery. It's important to hear from you, and of course, any of the associations who want to bring forward information. You can send it to me, send it to my office, send it to your association. It will get through to us. It will be part of our efforts to put in place a strategic plan that will come forward. There'll be some announcements that will be made in the coming days by the mayor, because we're filtering stuff up to him through the process. And I think some of those will address some of the challenges that we're experiencing at this point. But clearly, we want to actually do some specific, if you will, programs for the Black community because of the things that we've said already.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Deputy Mayor Thompson. We've gone over time a little bit, and I thank you for taking the time this morning. We do have a few more questions, but I'm going to ask if people could just email them to us, and we'll send them on to Councillor Thompson, and he will get them back to us, and we will have it on.
Can I just ask you one question? I understand that Alvin Curling was on the line. Is he on?
Yes, we're trying to.
On.
Yeah, he's still on, and I was trying to get him on to say something. Dr. Curling, can you say something? Let's see if we can. I made you a co-host, so hopefully we'll be able to hear you. Hello? Yeah, he's sending a chat. He's saying he'll support in any way to let you know that he will support, but he's not able to. There's something with his equipment, so he's not able
it's this mic.
to hear him.
We can see him, but we can't hear him.
Yeah, we can see, but we can't hear him. But
so he's having the same problem I was having initially.
Yes, at the beginning. But he did say that he's here to support you in any way, shape, or form that you may need.
Well, let's figure out how we can work with him and others and so on with the group. So let me also just say thank you all very much for allowing me the opportunity, and my team, Paul Perry, Ihor Wands, and Keisha Francis, to hear from you. We've taken notes, by the way, just to let you know, and I know that you've been taking notes as well. So if we could sort of compare those notes, Nadine and Velma, perhaps either later today or tomorrow, it'll be helpful. And then at the same time, we'll keep moving forward. If I could suggest, just as one final point, if we could maybe in another couple of weeks or so, if we can maybe have another one of these calls, we can figure out where we are and updates and so on. I think perhaps that would be helpful. And maybe we should look at having calls like these on a monthly basis going forward.
Definitely sounds great.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to say, Councillor Thompson, thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of the special task force, the mayor's special task force, because it's important that as Black community leaders, we are at the table, because if we're not at the table, we can't influence the decisions. And so thank you very much for that, to ensure that Black voices and Black businesses are represented. Thank you, Paul, for being on the line, and the Deputy Mayor's team, and Velma from Operation Black Vote Canada. Thank you so much as well for collaborating with us in this roundtable, and for all the businesses that are online. we at the BBPA, we have launched a 24-hour support line for if you just want to talk about anything, your taxes, just the current situation in terms of your business. We're here for you 24/7. You know, we've been in the Black business space for 38 years, talking to and working with Black businesses across the city, and we will continue to do that. And so please reach out and know that we're here for you at this time. Thank you once again for joining the call.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And before we leave, I just wanted to let you know that we're having another roundtable with the Provincial Minister of Small Business on Thursday. We'll send out that information to you soon.
Great. Thanks to everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So Trevor, I'm sorry, we ran out of time, and
Okay,
No problem.
But Nadine, I would like to really raise a point that I think that other people should have heard. Can I talk a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's still a few people on the line, so that's okay. You can certainly stay on, Anton, Karen,
Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, since the mayor's asking, or the deputy mayor, in fact, talking about we need to do things differently, he's looking for ideas from the community and so on. I wanted to get a sense as to what types of programs or incentives they provide to enable or to encourage members of the Black community to invest in their own businesses. For example, whether they're tax credits, you know, whether that is coming from community bonds and so on. I see there's a real need for us to have some types of incentives which would encourage collaboration and the sharing of resources. We talk about lack of infrastructure. How do we get support the working together in this regard? I'm looking at startup businesses. How do they survive in these times? If it is that we cannot rely on ourselves, I think we need to invest into our own businesses. And that is one of the things that should be encouraged, where it is we get tax incentives and other types of support from government, but that could impact more than one business at a time. And definitely venture capital fund. We need a source of venture capital fund. It's not just a matter of going to the bank and getting a loan and so on, because we know that the bars that the set is generally very high, and it's a challenge for us, but we can structure and work with our own venture capital fund in a more effective manner.
So, that's a great question. And maybe you can ask that question tomorrow, not tomorrow, on Thursday, right, Velma?
Yeah, Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe if you join the call on Thursday, just send your questions in early, Trevor, so we can forward it to the minister, and that can be one of the questions that we can ask at get-go. Okay?
All right, I certainly will. All right, thanks, Nadine.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Dean, I have a quick question though. How you doing? How you doing, everybody that's still on the line?
Yeah.
Like again, part of the challenge is, I so appreciate when they talk about doing programs that can actually help, and it's great, but the reality is part of the program was they're saying, technology companies and so forth, those companies take significant investment, and not only take significant investment, it's there's significant challenges that our community has to overcome either the leapfrog or the penetration. So, one, it's good to say that we're opening some funds towards this, but is there anything that as a community that we can do as a collective, say, listen, let us start focusing on a certain sector so that at least as a block where we can generate power. So for example, if, I don't know, you talk technology, let's say, for example, a small graphic or an IT provider can either collaborate together to generate funds or access a certain amount of funds, because as a whole, probably those smaller players won't qualify, and they don't have access to the knowledge nor maybe the insight in order to do so. Is there anything we can do as a group or as a committee or as a team to kind of educate, and not just educate, but matriculate someone through that process?
Yeah, so that's a great point, and it's something we talk about all the time. Just even in just this basic instance of getting these funds, like we talk about that $40,000 that's going to be available for all businesses, with who are qualified. That's the caveat, and there'll be a 10,000 of that interest free for 1 year, and 10,000 of that will be forgiven. However, I wonder how many of the Black businesses will qualify for that.
Qualify. That's the problem. They always mention these programs, and we're the last one to know about it. So oftentimes we don't make the cut. And when even do make the cut, the qualification periods, it's a process. Everyone came over here. Everyone's a doctor, lawyer, so forth, because we work the knowledge we have. And so oftentimes we're hurt the most because we don't know the knowledge. And then when it's time to be bailed out, quote unquote, or to help, we oftentimes miss that boat too. So I want to see, how do we get ahead of that?
You know what? Yeah, you know what it is. It's and what we at the BBPA want to do is to get our Black community, and I'm a Black business myself. I own a business. I want us to get us out of the just doing our business because, and not formalizing it. Many years ago, I was doing a deal with someone in the United States, and they said, it's time we formalize the relationship. And I thought, what the hell? What do you mean? She goes, well, we've had a few meetings. We now should have a contract and the meetings, and we should talk about compensation and remuneration. And I thought, what an interesting point. But we all operate our business, and there's no formalizing of that business. So I think one of the things, to your first point, collectively, that we can do as a group is, and this is what we're working with the businesses on Eglinton West to do, is to formalize their business. We don't know if some are registered. We don't like the income tax that has to be filed. There's certain business fundamentals that must happen if you're going to have a voice, if you're going to count, and if whether it's federal, provincial, or the city is going to take your business seriously. So I think as a group, what we have to do is we have to get that started. We have to have a business plan. We have to file our taxes, and we have to record our sales. So because when we have a formal structure, then we're able to take that and mobilize with other businesses and have a voice and have influence in terms of getting support. So I think in the Black community, what we should be doing and what we can do is take advantage of, when we talks about digital Main Street, not many people even know about digital Main Street. Not many people take advantage of those opportunities. There was a fund that enabled for $2,500 that every business could apply for to get funding to make them technology ready, to make them online ready. And not many people took advantage of that fund. So I think, collectively what we have to do is come together and share the information. And for businesses who are not able to sort of put that information, formalize their business, we have to utilize the city's programs that Paul Perry has. I mean, they're amazing, from starting a business, from marketing to online. How do you get online? Developing a business plan, all the things to get our businesses ready, so we're able to take advantages of opportunities that when in times like this, that's what they provide free of cost. So I think that's got to be the next strategy for Black businesses.
Nadine, can I make one suggestion though? I totally understand where you're going, but I'm going to go one step further. I think what the challenge that you're actually describing is, how do you become a business in a digital realm? That's one aspect, right? But the more specific challenge is, how do you access the funds that are available to enable you to thrive? Because establishing a business is only one thing. It's really the thriving. So you mentioned previously there's access to $2,500. I think what we're really needing to have a focus on is also matriculate people through the process and say step 1, step 2, step 3, because you really, knowledge by itself is not an effective tool to embrace change. It's really the knowledge combined where it's now embraced and actually done, and then finally adopted. And I think that's where the biggest gap is. It's not just, I think generally speaking, a lot of people, they may not know how to get on the digital space, for example, set up a website, blah, 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 marketing, blah, blah. But you know what? If you do this, here's what could happen. You can get funding for this. This is where the program is. There's going to be some government incentives that you can go after this. Like, give them directions on how, as a collective core, we can move forward or gain some real market penetration in these sectors. There is a government program that's coming through that will enable, or you can access a certain amount of I don't know, city funds or city contracts in this if you're set up this way or if you're qualified this way. So not just how to set up a business, quote unquote. That is good and that's the necessary needed. But how do you really thrive? It's not just about setting up, because we want to thrive. And the difficulty, oftentimes people are doing what they know or what the person told them. And so they're using traditional, old information in a rapidly changing environment.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think continually we have to use the resources that are available, because there are resources that's available. And if it's a matter of comprehending the information, because I know sometimes it's just like another language. It's very hard to understand. And one of the things that we advocate for at various levels of government is to have the information in a way where it's easier to digest. It's not buried in links upon links or behind numerous pages. A lot of the times you need someone to interpret that information. Right. So we're looking to have these seminars and sessions of interpreting that information. So all I can say is just keep posted. We do have those sessions now. A lot of them are online, and we'll be doing more and more of them online, and working with individuals like CAMC and even with the various layers of government to talk about procurement and what does those bids proposals look like.
Perfect. Yeah, that stuff is now where, at least for me, I think it's going to have a more meaningful impact, because I've worked with a lot of companies and oftentimes they have no clue of those programs. So what might be second nature to you, me, or whoever in their particular realm, I think the mass populace may not have any idea. And so I think that's really good.
Yes.
And another question was, on Thursday, how do I ensure to get access to that roundtable as well?
We're going to be sending out that. We're just waiting on one thing, right, Velma, to get back from the approval?
Yeah, we're just waiting for approval for the flyer. It'll be out by this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Curling, I've now done a button that says unmute all for individuals. Are you able to talk now? No one's muted at all.
Did you hear her?
Oh, I can hear him.
Oh, we can hear you very vague, lightly.
Oh, he's talking on his phone. Do you know what? I think your computer audio is off. Maybe your computer audio is off. Because we can hear you when you talk on the phone.
But I guess if you want to talk on the phone and it's high enough and we can hear you, you can make your comment that way.
I think they're hearing you through my phone, Alvin.
Oh, hi, Trevor.
Hi, Trevor.
Hi.
How are you, Trevor?
I am great.
Sorry, Trevor. I just saw your email now. Sorry. I hope you were able to get on.
I was.
Perfect.
Oh God, hold on. He'll be faint, but listen to him. Alvin, okay. Try and talk through my. You can talk through my computer. Go ahead.
Louder.
Can you hear me, Nadine?
Yes, I can.
Sure. I'm checking it. Black people who are very much are the caregivers and the health people, and they're impacted more so than anyone else. I think other around, who are the psychologists and all around, in order to serve those people who are impacted that way. Right now, they're going to a traumatic feeling, from experience where my daughter be she was telling me she been getting so many calls about people who are on all this, how to deal with it. And then we have to deal with that rather wounded when all this is over a week before. Could they all hear me?
I heard you.
So let me summarize what he was saying. That one of the biggest groups that gets impacted by this is the folks that are caring for those with psychological issues. So his daughter, his daughter is in that field. And your last piece, Alvin?
The frontline people.
Yeah, and the frontline people.
The nurses, the doctors, quite a few people are black people.
And quite a few of these people are best people, black people.
I agree.
So you're looking at it from the cleanup afterwards? So the question is, what can we do to support them now? The frontline workers, including those that are dealing with psychological, folks that are experiencing psychological issues, I guess from both the social distance as well as from just the physical pieces of it.
Yeah, and you know, that's a great point, and we're hearing that a lot. You know, we were on a call last week. I think, Velma, was it last Friday? The days
yeah, last Thursday, yeah.
Yeah. And it was with Minister Ng. And after the call, I think we had a lot of people on the call, and after, just like how we're gathered here, people just stayed on. They didn't leave, you know, because I think people need people and they want that connection still. We are having a psychotherapist, a leading Black psychotherapist, do a session. We haven't formalized it yet, but it'll be something like this, just so people can talk. One of the reasons, so I think there's going to be a great need for that, Dr. Curling, and that's a very good point. And I think, you know, one of the side effects of all of this will be, you know, the mental health issue after this pandemic is over, because you know, people are they're scared. There's a whole myriad of information that people are feeling, and you know, how are they outletting those? I had a woman who called to say that her psychologist had just called her to see how she was doing, because she was going to therapy on a regular basis. So I think it'll be quite something. And that's why we launched our 24-hour line at the BBPA to talk to business owners at 3 o'clock in the morning, whenever they want to talk. You know, we have someone available, because I think people just want to connect with people and talk through this. So very good point.
One of the things that may be of value, I guess, is really just learning. I'm not sure if you saw, Nadine, the interview with Bill Gates, probably, maybe it was last week. Anyways, a very practical approach. But his bottom line was, listen, the great news is that China and Korea have already gone through a lot of this. And so some of the best practices are actually sitting there. And this, again, is not the first pandemic we've ever had, obviously the ones that we've gone through, other than the SARS. But I was watching a movie last night, actually, I think it's called 93 or 94 Days, about the pandemic in the mid-90s that Nigeria had around Ebola. And there are best practices, I think, that we can learn from doing this before. But you're absolutely right. From the psychological side of it, the thing that's different, I believe, this time is that here we are living in a virtual time and people in social isolation. And social isolation in a regular time is relevant. The fact that there is now a ministry of loneliness in England tells us that social isolation in a virtual age is even more, I guess, vexing, if you will. This kind of adds an element to it. So, yeah, definitely work to be done. And I think where your group, where BBPA comes in, is definitely ensuring that people have a place to go if they want to talk.
Yeah.
Let me make it, Terrace, we can pass this on. I'm making one comment here. Most of the frontline workers, I'm talking about nurses, caregivers, doctors, and all these people, an enormous amount of them are Black. Mm-hmm. And that's that cost problem. Not that they're other people are. They are true. They're serving even psychology. But the nurses and all that, they are Black people who are really traumatized right now. And they seem to forgotten in a way, not even forgotten, but taken for granted that they will survive because they are the givers. So most of these Black folks have to be looked at very much so. They have it at work, and when they go home also, they also is traumatized. So also traumatized at home. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
And not only the other patients or individuals who are psychologically patients at the moment now, but those who are giving those services. That's my point too.
Got it. Did you guys hear that?
Yeah. So I think, it is also the Black Professional Association. I think what we probably, or Nadine, you know, try to get some of, you know, the professionals, the psychologists out and see how we can rally and maybe have a conference call with them into how to cope with frontline workers.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've been to the hospital lately, but you're right. A lot of the nurses are racialized, like they're, you know, they're Black, the nurses, and you know, sometimes in our community they don't know where to go, or they don't want to go somewhere. So we have to figure out how to get them on a call or get them the help that they need, and so they're not taking it out on family or on themselves, or just, you know, that they're not alone. How do we get that word out to them?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I gotta go because it's difficult to communicate in this way.
Yeah.
No, I hear you.
And I'll call you. I hope you'll be able to join us on Thursday's call, Dr. Curling, with the Minister of Small Businesses.
Yep.
Yeah.
Provincial minister.
The provincial minister. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Karen, thank you. Anton, thank you. Trevor, thank you. Roger, you're still there, I think. Trevor, we should connect. It's been so long. We definitely have to connect. Good to have you here. And Tracy, thank you. And of course, Velma, you're awesome. Thank you so much for just everything you do. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right.